Hey guys, Neil RC Racer here, bringing you a review of the Noble NB4 radio by FlySky. This is a 2.4 gigahertz surface transmitter, and it's made by a company that has only been in the game since 2006. And if you look at companies like KO Propo that have been in since, I think the 40s, or Airtronics, who've been doing it since the 70s, I believe. These guys are definitely the new kids on the block. So what were my first impressions of it? I'm pretty favorable. When I first took the radio out of the box, it's just a really solid feeling transmitter. You squeeze it, no squeaks or rattles. A lot of metal trim on here. Aluminum here in the swing arm, aluminum housing around the screen right here, aluminum around the power base, which we'll speak about here in a second. All the detents feel very nice on the switches and on the wheel. Wheel centers nicely. Throttle is very smooth. There's no play side to side. It's almost like it's riding on a rail there. Not a lot of seams to be found anywhere. The only seams I can spot are on this removable back strap here, between the removable back strap and the rest of the radio body. Since the back strap is kind of a stiff rubber, I mean, that's understandable. You know, there's going to be a little bit of flex, a little bit of gap there because you have two dissimilar materials trying to mate up with each other. So first impressions were really good. For a $200 radio, it actually exceeded my expectations quite a bit. So just a couple little features on the radio that I want to point out. This radio actually comes with two batteries. There is I believe a lithium-ion battery. I think it's a 18650 battery in the grip, which is actually the primary power source. And then the bottom, the base, is a battery as well, but they actually, even FlySky themselves refer to it as a power bank, and it can be used like a power bank. You can actually plug in a USB right there and charge your phone or any other device. And it doesn't serve as a primary power source for the radio. When you first turn it on, which I'll do right now, and I've normally there's a startup voice, female voice greeting you. I turned that off. I really don't need my radio talking to me. And the LED is by default blue, but I had to be different, so I changed it to red. And you can change it to a couple different colors. I believe yellow and green are available. And on startup, you can see that it shows you the transmitter voltage. I've got that set up for my Kyosho RB7SS already. Shows you the battery meter up top on the right. And right now the receiver's off in the car, so that's X'd out. But the transmitter is showing a full charge. That's because I just let it charge. And the way it charges is interesting. So you charge the power bank. You plug into the mini USB there, or micro USB, I'm sorry. And that actually charges the power bank. And what happens is the power bank will actually be used to charge the primary battery in the grip. So you're using a radio, and you start to drain the battery. And you're like, okay, well, this thing kind of needs a bump. And instead of having to plug it in, what you do is you just press this button here in the bottom. And that green light LED comes on. It tells you that the power bank is active. And when it's active, it's actually charging your primary battery. So if you can see the icon, the battery icon on the top right, it is now charging. And that's basically your LiPo battery charging your lithium-ion battery in the grip. So if you were to turn off the radio at this point, there it goes. And we'll give it a few seconds, and what you'll see is a charge indicator light up here, like a progress bar. And there it goes. And now it's charging your radio while it's off. So notice that your charge is low. You've got 10 minutes before your next race. No problem. Instead of looking for a cable or something along those lines, you just hit this button, let your power bank charge up your transmitter battery, and then by the time you're ready to go, this should be all juiced up and ready as well. So that's kind of a neat feature. So at the end of the day, you really don't need this on to run. I've seen some people online say that they've left this off. I don't think it really becomes any more cumbersome or heavier, much heavier to have this on at all times so that you have a ready power source. That's just me though. You can do whatever you like. So after having used it a couple times, what are my impressions of the radio? What are my overall opinions of the radio? I really like it. This is going to be my primary radio going forward for a couple reasons. First, it really is just as good as my KO and some of the top end radios that I've used. I'm not a radio, transmitter nut by any means, but I have used some of the top end stuff, either borrowed or owned, and I know what a high end transmitter feels like. This one, as far as the springs and detents, as I mentioned earlier, and the buttons and the overall solidity and feel of it is right there with it. If anything else, it actually feels more substantial than, say, something like Senwa's M series, their flagship stuff. It's probably in line with, like, Futaba. Has that kind of density to it that you get when you pick up like a Futaba radio. And I would say it's as far as the overall feel and feel of quality is a little bit above the Spectrum radios, even their their DX6s or 5s. The Spectrum radios are good radios, but they just feel a little hollow and tinny to me when you pick them up. Personal opinion. Yeah, the feel is great. The ergonomics suit me because of the pivoting wheel here, the ability for you to position it anywhere you want. I really like that. I like the compactness of it. Little things like the ability for it to kind of stand on its own versus my yours that tends to be kind of top heavy, and there are some radios out there that, some of your high-end radios are really probably about that much, a couple inches taller, with the wheel kind of sticking out a little far, like a lot of the Sanwa radios, and even the Spectrum radios where they have kind of an adapter that pushes the wheel really far out. The radios are just kind of a little top heavy, and so it's easy to kind of accidentally nudge it a little bit and the whole radio goes toppling over, and that's not really good for delicate electronics to go falling down on your bench. So this is pretty stable, honestly. I mean, you'd have to like really send it flying, knock it over. The second thing, or probably third thing right now, that really attracted me to it and is driving me to kind of making my primary radio is the menu system. So as you've seen earlier when I turned it on, and probably you've seen the other reviews, this is a touch screen. And the nice thing about it is they designed it to kind of, just be like the Spectrum 6 series and the Futaba radios, to where it's really kind of like a cell phone user interface. This one seems really intuitive. I haven't had a lot of time on some of the other newer touchscreen radios, so I can't speak to that too much, but this is really easy to use. So on this screen, you see your kind of your basic power information. So if your receiver was turned on, you would see the receiver voltage right there. Right now there's nothing showing, but if you look at the bottom at those bar graphs, you can tell that when I move the throttle, it gives you kind of a percentage indicator of how much throttle, how much brake you're giving the model. Not really useful in during driving, but when you're braking in the motor or braking your ball diffs or something like that, or if you're just trying to figure out what your adjustments are doing, that's pretty handy. And same thing with steering. If you're working with your servo or your endpoint adjustment, steering through, this gives you a nice graphical representation. But the real gem is when you click into the kind of dive deeper into the menu here, and it's not that deep. That's really the beauty of this thing. You go down one level and that's everything really right there. So if you're familiar with working with, let me adjust the light here a little bit. If you're familiar with transmitters, with RC transmitters, you'll recognize all these settings. You've got your servo reversing, for example. and then your model selection right here. So that's kind of nice. A lot of radios have their model selection buried somewhere. You got to go down like 4 levels to get to it. This one's right there, and you just like pick your model right there. I mean, you're done in like 4 seconds. It's really pretty simple. And one genius thing is for the buttons. A lot of radios just make you fumble through figuring out what, for example, VR1L is. This one gives you a pictorial, gives you a pictogram, graphical representation of the radio, showing you exactly which button it's referring to. So setting this is super easy. We like that. You know, this you shouldn't have to bust out the manual every time you need to play with the radio. That's what I had to do with my KO. It was a great radio, but it was completely like a kind of a dot matrix screen, and you know, like a one-line dot matrix screen, all menu driven, so you have to dive pretty deep for that. And there's a few screens there, so these are your slightly more advanced steering speed, throttle speed, and then you start to get into your gas, nitro settings like engine cut, mix, all that kind of stuff. Even a boat setting, I have no idea, don't know anything about boats, but something there for everyone, I guess. And then your instruction manual that you can click into without having to go to a physical manual. So yeah, it feels good. Menu is easy to use. How's it work in real life? Very well, with one little caveat. So like I said, I used it for a couple practices, a couple races. 99% worked flawlessly. I did have one little hiccup. When I first installed the power bank, I did not, and this thing is still on. Let me turn it off. I don't, no need for that thing to be charging it right now, and it's pretty full. But when I first clicked this thing on, I did not secure it properly. I didn't push it all the way back, and so it's pretty, there's quite a bit of resistance. So those of you that buy one, make sure you get it secured, push it all the way back until you hear a solid click. But it wasn't charging. So the charge on the primary battery and the grip got down below halfway on the battery meter there. And when it did that, I didn't realize it was at that point. I caught it after I saw the problem, which was my car basically went dumb a couple times, so it glitched. Went dumb a couple times. Luckily, it wasn't at full throttle. It was actually always happened right after a landing from a jump. The car would seem to kind of the transmitter will lose the car for about half a second. And you know, on a track, that's a lot. So the car kind of, you know, went off track, or I kind of overshot the turn, and luckily didn't break anything. But realized then that the transmitter was getting low as far as the voltage. So checked the power bank, clicked it all the way in, charged it for about 15-20 minutes. And that brought the charge up pretty much to full again. And I never experienced that glitching again. I mean, this is on the same track, standing in pretty much the same position on the stand. So logic dictates that it's the low voltage that did that. And full disclosure, I did not charge the transmitter at all before that. I just wanted to run out of the box, and the battery meter at that time was full. So I was like, oh, what the heck, I'm just going to use it. Well, I made sure I charged it after that. Didn't want to play with fire anymore. And after that, like I said, for probably the rest of that day of practice and then 2 more races, I did not experience any glitching. So hopefully that was just me being dumb and letting the charge on the battery get too low. So what are my final thoughts on this radio? I think it's probably one of the best deals right now as far as a higher end racing type transmitter, or even if you just want to use it for bashing and you want extra features, just more control over your model, you want a more comfortable radio, and maybe one day you'll get into racing, I'd say this is a good way to go. The only downside being that this really isn't available from any US retailers. You have to order it through places like Banggood or Hobby King. I got mine through Hobby King, and it came with 2 of the antennaless smaller receivers. Other ones, the ones that you buy from other retailers seem to come with a mix of the antennaless small receiver and the larger receiver with an antenna, which probably gives you better range, which is designed probably more for outdoor use, bashing, bigger buggies, 1/8 scale and stuff like that. I primarily race electric and play with electric vehicles, and especially with 1/10 scale buggies, there's not a lot of real estate in there, so I decided to get the smaller receivers. And Hobby King gives you two of them. They're the FGR4S receiver, and I believe the other one is just the FGR4, the one with the antenna. So just do whatever works better for you. But yeah, my final thoughts are, I really like this radio. Like I said, it's becoming my primary. I just like the mix of the comfort, the functionality, the reliability. One thing I should probably speak to really quickly is that this radio is pretty quick. So unlike the first FlySky radio that I used, I really can't detect any lag. I mean, I'm not a professional driver. I'm not even like a super talented driver or a really fast driver, but I can definitely feel a laggy radio. FlySky claims the Noble NB4 has latency somewhere along the lines of 3 milliseconds. If I recall correctly, the Airtronics radios typically boast like low 2s milliseconds as far as their response time, and Futaba always kind of lived in that 3 to 4 millisecond range, and some of the cheaper radios are sitting in the 8 to 10 millisecond range, and there are people using those 8-10 millisecond radios for racing and kicking my butt. So at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal, a few milliseconds here and there, but definitely the NB4 is up there with the best of them. If those claims are true, I have no real way to measure that. I believe there is a video online of a guy testing it with a servo in slow motion, like however many frames per second, and you can tell I think he used an older Futaba radio that still pretty fast. It should be up there as far as pretty low as far as the millisecond response time, and this radio kept up pretty well. In fact, it was probably one of the faster ones. So I personally can't tell that it's holding me back in any way, and that's really the big thing with a transmitter. It really shouldn't handicap you. It's not gonna catapult you into the next skill level per se. I mean, but what a bad radio does is it handicaps you. It holds you back because of the response time or the ergonomics or just reliability problems. It just, you start to have to worry about it and think about it. And the biggest compliment I can give this radio is it just kind of disappears. It just does its job, just like my Airtronics radios did, and my KO radio. You just turn it on and, the race is over and nothing bad happened. And you don't feel like, hey, I should have made that turn, but the car reacted too slowly and hit the pole or flipped over, none of that. So yeah, I recommend this, and it's just icing on the cake that it's $200, all said and done. So hopefully this helps somebody make a decision, especially since FlySky isn't really like a go-to brand for a lot of people. Maybe they can base their decision after hearing the information that I put out there. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you, and take care.